I'm Alex Pentland, but everybody calls me Sandy, faculty here. And I was asked to talk about collective rationality, which is hopefully what we do in our companies and in our societies and in our communities. And what I wanted to do is actually say that we have a number of cognitive biases that we apply to these things. And these are not the ones you hear all the time, that make us misunderstand things, okay? And I want to sort of go through the evidence about this, and then there'll be a couple fairly simple takeaways. So here's the thing, right? So let's take a really simple example, like people in the stock market trying to make money, right? It turns out that there's very simple things you can do to make money. Like, for instance, the things that are going up for a week are actually pretty good things to bet on. They go down, but that as a strategy is really pretty good. But that's not what people pick. If you look at data from thousands of financial traders, now these are people 40 to 50 years old all around the world. They do this for a living. They're the best, right? You find that they pick losers and pick things in the middle. What are they doing? I mean, this is sort of crazy, right? There's a well-known strategy. It works. We looked at the data, and that's not what they do. So what's going on? Well, let me show you one of the things that's going on, and that is that, when we think about these things, we think about, what are the facts? What are we supposed to do? But let me suggest a different way to do this. And it has a technical name, Bayesian portfolio theory, which sounds sort of scary, but you can use it in everyday life. What it basically means is you're going to think probabilistically. You're going to say, well, okay, what's the most likely thing, next most likely, et cetera, and you're not going to put all your money on the one bet. You're going to spread your bets a little bit because it's probabilistic and you don't know. And that is the optimal thing to do. And there's a little equation for you. It's Bayes' formula. I'll tell you about it in a minute. But it has a couple of pieces. The posterior is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to bet proportional to this posterior probability. It has the likelihood, which is what we always think about. Here's the facts. What does this mean? What's the likelihood of this working out, right? And that's what we focus on almost all the time. But there's also this prior probability. And if you remember back to high school or college classes, people would then say, but where do you get the prior probability? I'll tell you where professionals get it. So it turns out the facts are useful, okay, when you look at like thousands of real data. And you can do some estimates like that using that, but you're missing this prior probability. And where professionals get this prior probability is from other people. Almost social media. They look at the word. You've heard the word on the street? The word on the street is just as important as the facts. How many of you have ever started like hedge funds or done stuff like that? I have. So, you do this sort of math and things. You find something that really predicts the stock market, okay? Turns out this is a great way to lose money. Okay? Because the only time you're really going to make money is when everybody else bets wrong. Okay? So you have to actually think about these two things, and that's what professionals do. So let me show you an example of what we asked professionals to do. So this is a couple thousand professionals all around the world that do this for a living. They handle your retirement account, so you want them to be good. And what we did is we set them up an experiment. And the experiment has two pieces. One is we show them a bunch of data about a futures option, and it could be a simple one like the S&P 500. And we say, what's your bet for 2 weeks out? What's the futures, right? Okay, this is business as usual, right? And then what we did is we showed them what everybody else bet. And we asked, how much did they actually change their bet? So they've done what you're always told to do, which is you look at the data, you look at the evidence, you make your bet. It's like all that, right? Why would they change it just because other people are doing it? Well, I'll show you why. So let's just a sort of little nomenclature. There's what everybody else bet, and then there's what you bet. That's the green stuff, and there's a difference between them. We'll call it alpha just because Greek letters are good. And that's how much they changed. And what you find is if you look at how accurate these guys were, the ones that ignored the social were actually more accurate. And the ones that paid attention to the social got progressively less accurate. And you can see, the more they paid attention, the less accurate they were. It's not a big effect, though, okay? But this is not the whole story. This is a portfolio. It's not a one-shot deal. If you looked at risk, it was a very different story. So the people who paid attention to the numbers had the biggest risk. Yeah, on average, they were quite accurate, but they also blew it big time sometimes. Whereas the guys that paid attention to the social didn't make quite as much money with each trade, but they didn't lose big time either. Interesting. And actually, that not losing big time dominates a little bit of accuracy, right? If you're trading and you're making 1.5% more or 0.5% more, that's all great. But then if one of your trades loses you 33%, it's bad. And we had a situation like that where some of the things that they were betting on just went the other way. This is a period, we didn't plan this, but it was during Brexit. And it turned out that all the people called it wrong. But the ones that paid attention to social, for instance, did better. So, interesting. So, what is the sort of story to take away from this? One is that don't do what you're taught all the time, which is just sort of focus on the facts and try and work out what the margins are and things like that. Because while that's interesting, that only works where things are stable. So the decisions you're making now are in exactly the same environment as the decisions you made previously when you got the evidence for making this decision. How many of you live in a stable ecology? Nobody, right? I mean, more than ever, things change quickly, which means all that logic is likely to lead you astray more and more and more. What are you going to do? As I just showed you, a way to think about this is that thinking by yourself, right, from the facts that you have, has a bug, and that is that as things change, you're going to make big-time mistakes. But by paying attention to the social, and you weight it in, you don't just pay attention to the social, right? But you weight it in proportional to your risk tolerance. So if everybody else is betting something, you should pay a little bit more attention to that. If it's a pretty well-distributed word on the street, then you're probably in safe ground, okay? That's sort of the way to think about this. And that might be obvious, but, you know, the people I know don't do this. A lot of people don't do this. So it's worth remembering, business as usual is also a good way to lose big. You need to pay attention to all the other people playing the game with you and what they think, because maybe you don't have all the information, maybe you calculated it wrong, maybe things have changed and you just haven't heard about it yet. Well, okay, so that's about finance. This is about as simple and clear a thing as you can get in the sense that you know when you win and you know when you lose, right? What about something else? Well, I picked something else that would give you something to talk about over dinner, okay? So let's again, the red stuff is the social histogram. It's what the other people are betting on. And the beliefs are what you figure out from all the things that you pay attention to. But rather than do money, let's do politics. Okay, so these are 5,000 people distributed from all across the United States, evenly Republican, Democrat, Western, Central, Eastern, old, young, all even. And what we did is we asked them a series of questions. And the questions were, you know, how likely would you be to suspend the Constitution? How likely would you be to pick up arms? And I mean, all this stuff that undermines democracy, right? And what we did is we asked this both of the Democrats and of the Republicans. So the Republicans, think the Democrats are crazy and are trying to undermine democracy, okay? Now, maybe you're not too surprised about it, but this is probably a mostly Democratic audience, but you might think of the Republicans as crazy if you're a Democrat, and you might believe, for instance, that they are have these beliefs about taking up arms. But if you ask them, so these are the Republicans' beliefs about Democrats. Now, you're probably, let me do this again, sorry, because it's confusing. Well, the Republicans believe about Democrats, and I would take this audience just by assumption to be mostly Democratic. This is what they think about you, okay? But if we ask you, the Democrats, you have no such opinions at all, okay? So which way do you think it is the other way around? If we ask you guys about the Republicans, well, it's almost identical, right? So the the Republicans think that the Democrats are cheating, that they're doing all sorts of things. But if we actually ask, the Democrats believe that the Republicans are cheating, but if you actually ask the Republicans, this is like going to them in a private place where they can say what they truly believe, so there's no bias about that. No, they're not. So why do we have this distorted picture of the other side? Well, everybody talks about disinformation, but I think it's more what they call nut picking. So nut picking is all of the press and all of the social media go for things that are infuriating. The crazy people. That's all you hear about all the time. And the crazy people are indeed crazy, okay? And so we get the idea that all those other guys, whether you're left or right, are crazies, okay? And that's why you have this huge change, I think, okay? Well, how can you change it? Well, what everybody says, well, we need to get the facts. Well, but the facts are available to both of these people. Everything that you do, every study that's been done, so these people have seen the facts. They've also seen the nuts, okay? And somehow showing them another fact isn't going to change things, right? But let me suggest one other thing you could do. Remember with the traders? Showing them what everybody else was thinking actually changed what they did, despite the facts. You could give them more facts about the market and stuff like that. It wouldn't change it much at all. But when you say, hey, everybody else is betting this way, they change their opinion. That's actually sort of an amazing thing. So would that work here? Well, what we did is we showed the Republicans what the Democrats say about themselves in private. And we showed the Democrats what the Republicans say about themselves in private. So this is not about the facts as much as what's the game, right? Do you have all the facts? Do you know what's happening? What is the game is the way I think of it. And what's really amazing is this social prior, right? What's really amazing is if you take those attitudes, those highly polarized attitudes about the other guys, and you just show them this one time. So you just say, hey, here's what the Pew Charity Trust said about self-report by those guys. That's all you're doing, one time. You get this huge change in attitude. People become effectively depolarized. And in fact, if you then ask them about candidates who they'll vote for, they go back to being central. Whereas previously, they would have picked real radicals, either left or right. So what does all this mean? Well, you know, huge effect of the social exposure, telling people about what the game is. You know, here's the thing you have to solve. You thought you were solving this over here, but no, it's really this problem here. Seems to be the thing. And your actions seem to depend on what you think the game is. The strategies you pick are, whether you think of it this way or not, are actions to survive in this game, whether it's politics or finance. And actually, it depends only weakly on things like the facts, and I'm assuming it's sort of an information-rich environment here, and your beliefs about them. It's really, what are the other guys doing? What can I do? Considered as sort of the primary thing, and then looking at the details to make sure that that works. And the strategies depend on the competition. That's what I just said, not just logic and belief. So we tend to forget that. In a stable environment, we sort of know what the game is. We know what the other guys are doing. So we just look at the facts and the numbers and we try to optimize. But in a changing environment, that's not true. And you need to really ask, how are all these other people? What are their strategies? And how do I survive in that? And that's more important than any little detailed facts. Okay? So that's it. Something to debate. And hopefully you'll have a good dinner today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Sure.
Let's let it close up.
Okay, you close up. That's good. Did I give you something to chat about?
Sure did, yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
That was a good.
Well, did you have a good day? All right, well, I thank you all for coming. I hope you come back next year and you have one more duty, and that is to go over to the 7th floor of Sandberg and join me for a drink after the symposium. And that's it. Thank you very much.